We've got some wild swings in the cost of crude this week as investors wait for the president's next move on Iran. The U.S. could be in the final stages of a deal, but the military option still locked and loaded. The diplomatic window is narrow, and the president says he is perfectly comfortable with either outcome. Welcome to the Big Money Show. I am Dagan McDowell, along with my brilliant, astute, and studied co-host, Taylor Riggs. Competent, please. Brian Bremberg as well, Jackie DeAngelis, and with us for this hour, Fox Business real estate contributor, Katrina Campins. Great to see you, Katrina.
Thanks for having me.
Bond traders at the wheel as inflation drives fears on Wall Street and interest rates higher much of the week. A deal with Iran would be the most powerful economic relief valve for Americans coping with high gas prices and high mortgage rates. But markets are skeptical that diplomacy can prevail. Tankers are moving again through the Strait of Hormuz. That is a nice development. But Iran is still warning of retaliation if U.S. military action resumes. President Trump is making clear that this is not an open-ended negotiation.
You said yesterday you're about an hour away from making a decision. Where does that stand today? Have you heard anything from them?
Right on the borderline, believe me. If we don't get the right answers, it goes very quickly. We're all ready to go. We have to get the right answers. It would have to be a complete 100% good answers, and if we do, we save a lot of time, energy, and lives, most importantly.
How long will you wait?
Could go very quickly, or a few days. It could be a few days, but it could go very quickly. Iran is a defeated nation.
Who wants it? Jackie?
I'll grab it on oil because oil is over $100 a barrel. So it just shows the volatility on this seesaw back and forth that we're seeing from the president. He made some comments that were reported by the AFP yesterday. He said, we're in the final stages of Iran. We'll see what happens. Either have a deal or we're going to do some things that are a little bit nasty, but hopefully that won't happen. He went on to say, we're going to give this one shot. I'm in no hurry. Ideally, I'd like to see few people killed as opposed to a lot. We can do it either way. And I really think the destruction, the loss of life, that is what he's trying to avoid here. But it is all going to hinge on whether or not the Iranians, whoever is in charge over there, is willing to hand over the enriched uranium. I don't think that he's going to accept any kind of deal without that stipulation. And I'm thinking about this because I thought the tentacles of this regime would be reluctant to want to do that. But as they keep getting squeezed, there is a method to this madness. They're going to be locked in a zone where basically they say we hold on to some power, or whoever is in charge at the top level, they need to flee the country and get out of there as fast as humanly possible. And I think they will choose some power over no power. Now, let's look at this a few chess moves down the line, because if you were able to get that uranium from them and you've got, you know, sort of the evil, lower-ranked despots in power in Iran, which I said I didn't want to see happen. Without that uranium, they have power over their people, but they are powerless to the rest of the world to be able to threaten and cause the destruction that they have in the past. Plus, there's enough destruction that it's going to cost them a lot of money to rebuild their country the way it is. They'll be quiet for quite some time. So if the president can achieve this, it's really, really would be very remarkable. I think even without the uranium, you might see an opportunity after this for the people to rise up and take their country back. I'm still hopeful of that. So I've long said that I've been getting frustrated with this, but that I do trust the president, and he usually has some larger plan in place. I would say at this point, we've got to wait and see and try to kind of, you know, have faith. That's all you can do at this point as we watch these prices. Oil, markets, everything is kind of going the way that he wants it to. The yields are not necessarily, so that may pressure him a little bit. But we've got to see how it plays out.
Do you want me to pick it up? I'm going to start with the good news, then I'll kind of hint on the bad news. I like that you talk about oil. Let's talk about that. Here's the good news. I'm bringing up my big SAT words for you, Jackie. Backwardation. That's when oil prices are lower in the future than they are now versus normalization, which is where they would go up. Backwardation is good. So the good news is the market is still pricing in lower oil in the future. Second good news, economic data at the global level has been surprising to the upside. Okay, a little bit more resilient. Third, there hasn't been a hawkish response yet from the Fed. 3 good news, but let's talk about the 3 bad news on that. With oil, even though it's in backwardation, Brent futures 6 months out are at 88. So that means we're approaching the end of the year and the market still thinks we're going to have an 88 handle. That is not the 50 or 60s where we started, you guys. Second of all, economic data. Even though global economic data has been good, I'm going to hit you with some PMIs that we got this morning. In prices paid for manufacturing, it was the largest monthly increase since June of 2022. Goods prices showed a big rise, the rate of increase the highest since September of 2022. Finally, we talked about how we haven't had a hawkish response yet from the Federal Reserve. Okay, but here's the bad news. We got the Fed meeting minutes yesterday. Officials showed that they are more open to the potential of needing to raise rates. Here's a quote. A majority of participants, highlighted that some policy firming would become appropriate if inflation continues to run above 2%. Many of those officials said the Fed should drop its easing bias as a result. So it's sort of this push-pull narrative where we've held up so far. But I'm starting to get worried about some of the more recent data points that we're seeing a la today and yesterday.
And in terms of the backwardization that Taylor was talking about, the February futures contract for going into next year is above $80 a barrel. You only get into the 70s until you get into the March contracts. So this is very elevated fuel and oil prices moving into next year. And as a reminder, oil WTI was 67 and change before the Iran conflict started. So all of that is inflationary.
Brian is unconvinced.
No, I'm not. I'm thinking.
And gasoline prices today is the high of this cycle.
Yeah.
Nationwide average is $4.56. I'm pulling it out of memory.
Sounds very right to me. Okay.
But this is also bad. Sorry, Brian. 7 states now topping $5 a gallon.
Yes. So I think President Trump has shown amazing patience so far in the ceasefire, okay? But I think the time for patience is over. Patience is a virtue.
I just got my patience back today.
But it is not, Jackie. So I was thinking of what is a virtue related to patience, but it's kind of the opposite of patience. And I have one for you.
Why do you ask me these questions?
Because you sit to my left, and I don't know why I looked that way.
Okay, fine.
I want to see fortitude. I think it's time for fortitude with Iran. So what is fortitude? It's firm hope and self-assurance in what you're doing, okay? And I think what we're doing with Iran is the right thing. But I think we've got to do something different. All the things that make you, at the same time, worried or not worried or whatever, all that stuff laying out there. What it just tells me is this isn't working. This thing is not working anymore. Okay. We've got to do something else. I don't think that escapes the president. I think he understands we got to do something else. And I think he knows that something else could have serious costs. That's why he keeps talking about the time and the energy and the lives, and I appreciate that. His critics want to paint him as a warmonger. He's not. He's a deal maker. He is repeatedly telling Iran, step back from the brink and make a deal. They will not do that. They do not dance. They are ideological crazies, and they're not interested in a deal. And I think the time has come to abandon that hope. Patience has run its course. Fortitude is what we need now, because with fortitude, we can win in Iran, we can open the strait, we can fix the oil problems, we can make the backwardation even better, and we can get out of this mess. And because this doesn't work for anybody. This status quo does not work for anybody. And I think the president knows that's got to change. And I think it's going to be a big step when it does, and we got to have fortitude.
What about this? What if he did a hybrid plan? And obviously, I'm not a general here, but he could still continue the conversations and the negotiations and do something.
Yes.
Maybe it's go back to opening the strait, trying to open it fully. Maybe it's seizing Karg Island. Maybe it's one piece of the plan to show them for real that he's very serious about this.
You bet.
The new piece of, well, the knock-on effects of what's going on in Iran in the last week or so, or longer-term interest rates have really shot up. And that's in part because they started going up at the beginning of the conflict because of the additional Treasury supply coming on. But this is now because of inflation, and the Federal Reserve certainly is not going to cut rates, and that adds to the deficit because of the potential increased interest expense. And it could become the bigger concern is a death spiral. That being said, so mortgage rates, we just found out today, the Freddie Mac 30-year fixed mortgage survey came in at 6.51. And the prior week, it was 6.36. Now, you go back a year ago, 6.86 was where 30-year fixed mortgage was. So lower than a year ago, but this is a housing market that's struggling. This is the 1-2 punch of higher fuel prices and higher mortgage rates that consumers do not like.
And to your point, Brian, Trump knows what he's doing, and one thing he does understand is the cost of construction. And I've began to see that consumers are not only affected at the gas pump, but now the cost of construction is going up. And simple things, like you'll call a plumber or you'll call an electrician or a handyman, and they'll mention, well, I'm gonna have to charge more because of the cost of gas to get there. And so we're seeing this affect consumers overall. And in the housing market right now, Dagan, as you mentioned, we need relief. And this is just adding to the cost of that. I do think that a lot of consumers are expecting change with the new Fed chair, and I don't necessarily think that's going to happen right away because, as we've all discussed, mortgage rates are more closely tied to the bond market than they are to the Fed. And with inflation continuing to be sticky, things are going to take some time. And so consumers need to have patience, Brian. Another thing is, that affects the housing market is the cost of insurance and the cost of property taxes. We are seeing that K-shaped in the housing market, which we'll discuss a little bit later during the hour. But the luxury market's still continuing to do well because those people are paying cash, whereas first-time home buyers still depend on a mortgage. Right. And it really does affect the ability to buy a home.
Amen.